Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very cool Shane Plays video. And it's not just Shane Plays, it's also joined by Tony Dutra, who is an MIB, a marketing rep, if you will, for Steve Jackson Games. He was on the Shane Plays radio show a couple weeks ago talking about GURPS, the Generic Universal Role-Playing System. And after the show, we talked, and I said, man, it would be so cool if we recorded some stuff on how to play GURPS. And he agreed. I'm so glad he did. So what this session is we're going to show how to roll, or not roll up, we're going to show how to create a character in GURPS. And then we're going to have a separate session a week from now. And he's going to take me through an adventure to show how the game rules work. And we'll also be joined by Mook for that, who was also on the show with us. So, Tony, thanks so much for joining me tonight. How you doing, man?
You're welcome. I'm doing fine.
Cool.
Thanks for having me.
Well, from here, it's your show. So what we're doing is we're on GURPS, Generic Universal Role-Playing System, and there's a very robust character creation system in here. And as a very experienced GM for GURPS, you're going to take me through, like the noob that I really am, and we're gonna make a character. I'm really looking forward to it.
Right. Okay. So, as a completely new player, somebody that's just barely got this book, from experience and knowing different reactions to it, I've noticed that people, they're going to instantly start making characters, and that's great because you want to know what you can and cannot do in the system. But if you know that you're going to be playing with a game master right away, or you happen to get the book and you want to be the game master right away, there are certain things that you should probably do before you ever even mess with the character creation process at all as a player, right?
Okay. All right.
And that is, you should know what setting you're going to make the character in. Otherwise, you've got nothing to base anything off of. Right?
And that's a very important point, because GURPS, being a generic universal role-playing system, can be futuristic, it can be fantasy, it can be cyberpunk, it can be a blend of many things. So, very important point. I don't want to make a cyberpunk character for a fantasy setting, in other words.
Right, or even something completely out of the ordinary. I mean, with GURPS, you can literally make any type of character that you want. So if I'm going to run a Roman Empire game, you making a My Little Pony that shoots lightning bolts out of their eyes and stuff like that, yes, you can do it, but it becomes a matter of, this is not the focus of the setting that we're going to all be playing communally in. So,
right. So why would you do that? Right.
What I wanted to show you specifically, and everybody that's watching and listening in right now, is what we need to know before we ever mess with the character sheet at all anyway.
Okay.
And that's this.
All in a night's work, character creation rules.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is, while we're looking at this, I don't know if the people at home are going to be able to see this whole thing. I'm going to scroll up and down.
Yeah,
this is very simple, okay?
Okay.
But then again, what we're actually going to be playing is actually quite simple anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. When I run other games, this could be a little bit longer. But what I have right here are all the basics that you need to know for making a character for this game that we're going to be playing.
And one thing that'll immediately jump out at folks is GURPS characters are done on a point system. So the points are the currency that you use to buy your traits. And traits, as I understand it, reading through the introduction to GURPS, can be your attributes, advantages, that sort of thing. So, like in some games, a trait might be actually a game rule. Like I have 4 traits, and they are this. A trait is sort of an umbrella term in GURPS for for basically all the things that you can buy to make your character what your character is. And in this case, it
Right.
looks like with the intro adventure we're going to do next week, that it looks like we'll start with 125 points, which they said that the average GURPS adventurer is usually between 1 and 200 points.
Right. And one thing that we should know is this particular module is a solo adventure that was built for 3rd edition rules. So I've updated it so it will work for the 4th edition, which is pretty much standardized. I mean, that's what everybody really runs. If for the people that are still running 3rd edition, I think it's just because they don't want to buy the new books or whatever.
Yeah.
Those rules are very similar. The characters that are built specifically for all in a night's work are all 100 character points. I upped it a little bit just because the cost of a few of the stats are a little different, and that's it.
Okay,
but they're virtually the same.
Okay, so let's kind of, if you would, kind of take us through this, through the line items and tell us what we're going to be trying to do here. And this ties into what you said at the very beginning. Before you make your character, you have to know what setting you're making the character for. So this is
right.
The GM, in this case you, would say, here's what you need to know before you make your character.
Correct. Yeah, you want to be focused when you're doing it and not kind of get off topic. Otherwise, the GM is going to tell you this character doesn't fit or whatever. But so anyway, the basis of this game is, like the synopsis is, you're breaking into somebody's house and you're robbing it. Okay, all in a night's work.
All in a night's work.
I feel it's okay for me to tell the player that, so they can actually make something that would be able to get away with their job, with their task in the game. So you're going to be making a character that is going to break into somebody's home and you're going to rob the place. You're going to be given 125 character points. That's what you're going to use to make your character. And optionally, you can take an extra 20 points worth of disadvantages and 5 quirks. Now, what those are if you want more than the 125 character points that I've given you, you can take an extra 25 in those specific areas. Meaning, if I take something that potentially is disadvantageous to my character, I'm going to get extra points for it because it hurts me in some way.
Right. And one thing I noticed... Go ahead.
There's a max of 20 points that I have in this. I mean, usually there's more, but we don't want to go overboard on the disadvantages, at least for a one-shot like this, because people will tend to forget that they even have them.
Right. Well, I was reading the intro, and they were also saying under the disadvantage limit, it also helps the game to keep the game from being a circus to where the game master has to keep up with all these disadvantages. For example, you don't want to have a clumsy, one-eyed alcoholic outlaw who is afraid of the dark. Just so that. And what they say in the book, I'm on page 11 of the basic set. And by the way, if people are interested in buying GURPS, the basic set comes in 2 books. Characters, which is what I have, and then there's also a campaigns one. If all you're wanting to do is play the game and not run the game, all you have to worry about is the characters book. And they also said most rule of thumb, most GMs, but you can change this to suit your need. They'll usually say hold disadvantages to 50% of the starting point. So if you were starting at 100 build points, then you couldn't take more than 50 points. But that's just a rule of thumb. There's nothing that says you have to do it that way.
Okay, so anything that has a negative point value is considered a disadvantage. So if you're taking anything with a negative point value, that is giving you character points and is going to count toward that maximum. Okay, and we'll get into exactly what is considered a disadvantage in a little bit when we actually start making the character.
Okay.
The next sentence is beginning characters are in TL4, which means tech level. So now, having run this game quite often, over the decades, I'm fairly certain that this is what they were going for. It doesn't actually state that, but your character, at least in GURPS Fourth Edition, your character is going to be considered in Tech Level 4, and from various cues inside of the game, it looks to be somewhere in colonial Europe someplace. There's glassware, gas lamps and stuff like that I've noticed, actual gated buildings and stuff. So the front of the game actually says that it's fantasy. Okay, sure, fantasy.
Why not? Now, but let's just camp out for a brief moment on tech level, because this is a core concept to GURPS, and the tech level is, I guess, the higher the level, the more advanced the technology. And this is one of the core mechanics that allows this one framework of rules to work for so many different settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
tech level 4 would be like the Renaissance. They call it the Age of the Sail, which probably is a good defining statement to make. That was once we had ocean-going voyages, that increased technology exponentially just by itself. The third tech level would have been after 650 AD, so anything during any part of the medieval era.
Right.
Tech level 2, Iron Age. Tech level 1, Bronze Age. Tech level 0, Stone Age. Tech level 5 would be Industrial Age. 6 would be World War II, stuff like that. 7 would have been it's right before the digital age. Tech level 8 is the digital age, so tech level 7 would have been like the 80s, 70s, 60s, around in there, that era.
So we're in tech level 8. Are we in 8 now?
We are in tech level 8. If we were doing a game in contemporary times, it'd be tech level 8. We're getting close to tech level 9 every day. Tech level 9 would be, the microscopic age, nanotechnology, and stuff like that. And then it keeps on going further down until you hit 12, and then past that, it's just
genetic.
Too crazy. It's way crazy.
Yeah, you hit that. You hit the classic Arthur C. Clarke. Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. What's interesting to me about tech level, since this game came out, real life has advanced 2 tech levels, or is about to. It's advanced 1 tech level, and it's close to advancing another one. That's just interesting to me from just a geeky perspective. But I don't want to go ahead.
Pretty much, but one thing I noticed that also is the 3rd edition, because they knew that the book was becoming somewhat dated, they shifted the tech level up like 20 years. So they shifted the tech level 8 up a bit. So, but yeah, I mean, in 3rd edition, tech level 7 was tech level 8. So yeah, you're totally on the money with that. So let's continue. The next step down would be beginning characters of status 0 or below, and average wealth or below. And the reason for this is because it would not make sense game-wise if you made yourself a character that was like a duke robbing some guy's house. There's no point.
Right.
You don't need to rob somebody's house if you're already up the social ladder. Even status 0 or average wealth may be pushing it because it's kind of dangerous work.
So what is, in game terms, what does status 0 mean? To me, that sounds like they're
just
dirt
going to
poor.
get to that.
Okay, all right.
So status 0 literally means like they're a normal free man, right? Just a normal person. They're not a criminal. They're not a serf. They're just a working slob, basically, right? Just a normal guy. The next step up, status 1, would be like the merchant class. And then you go up from there. And in fact, the pages inside of the book that dictate this would be on, it's right before the equipment.
Ah, okay.
Actually, it's on 265. It's in the cost of living section on equipment. So if you look there, -2 would be a serf. -1 is a poor citizen or bondsman. 0 is a freeman. 1 is a merchant, squire, etc., etc. So these are very generic terms. One thing I want to stress is you shouldn't take these things literally, because in a different game world, those may not exist at all. But at least it gives you an idea of what those numbers represent.
Interesting. I love how it gives, for example, status 5. It gives multiple descriptors to help understand. It gives great noble, or a multinational corporate boss, and then like status 2 would be like a landless knight, a mayor, or a business leader. So I like how it gives those different descriptors to help you kind of understand where things fit.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm definitely. Let's see. Yeah, I guess in real life I'd probably be status 0.
I think most people that we in America really would be, or -1. That's the status 1 would be like upper middle class.
Yeah.
Right, middle class.
Well,
so.
Now to apply this to real terms, for a couple of terms I was on the county government. So I was probably somewhere in between 0 and 1, just because that elected status, gave me some access to people in situations I wouldn't have normally gotten. But right now I'm square on 0. So interesting.
Right.
Yep.
And where it says average wealth, says $2,000. The dollar symbol in this game is kind of used generically. I mean, it could literally be any symbol that you need to for the credit in the game that you're going to be using, but we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so we're an average person.
Or lower, right?
Yeah, or lower.
I mean, it would definitely make sense for a poor citizen or a serf to be robbing people's houses, or even a freeman if you needed to get the money, but not really anything above that. It wouldn't make any sense. You have too much to risk.
Right.
And that's what I wrote underneath it. Robbing homes is dangerous and unlikely for anyone above these social brackets. So next would be, by the way, the wealth, like I was saying, that is actually it's not really a statistic, but you do kind of have to pick what wealth you start out as.
Is that something you buy with your? Okay, you buy that with your points.
Right, and we'll talk about that also. You buy the status with your points, and you buy the wealth with your points also. Everything's got a point value in this.
Okay.
Everything's got a point value in this. Beginning characters won't need to worry about jobs or cost of living, since they won't come into play. You could possibly be a professional cat burglar, or just need some supplemental cash. So there is ways to make a character that actually has an employment other than, the game that you're going to be playing, the adventure or whatever, and the cost of living, if you want to nickel and dime how much it costs to let this character live at that social bracket. And those are optional, right? In fact, as we go through all of these, once, we'll go over each one of the things in there in here as as well as I possibly can. But one thing I want to state, like off the bat, is most everything in this game is optional. It's just dependent on what the GM wants to do for flavor in his game. If he doesn't want to allow jobs or costs of living at all in there because it's just going to get in the way, he's not going to put them in there. If wealth and status are going to be too much for the game master and he doesn't want to deal with that, he doesn't have to do that either. These are tools for the GM to explain the character and the world better. And that's really all they are. Does it explain your character less if they do not appear? Sure, maybe, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're mandatory, because your character is still going to tell a story of their own with the knowledge that they have and other aspects of that they are going to possess later when you finish the character. But for the purposes of this, as it says on the last sentence in this character, are built using only the GURPS Basic Set Characters book. So everything that we're going to be talking about tonight is in the GURPS Basic Set Characters book. And I'm going to try and hit as much of the material in this book as possible. This is what you use to base everything else off of. There are a lot of books that you can buy to make your character and your game more and more sophisticated. As you become a more and more sophisticated GURPS GM and GURPS player, you will want different books if you don't want to make the material yourself. And those are optional. But for the purposes of this, since this is the book that everything is based off of, this is the flagstone, basically. This is what we're going to make everything from, and using no other material. Okay, so knowing that, the next section is advantages, perks, disadvantages, quirks, and skills. We already talked a little bit about disadvantages, but these other and quirks give you 1 point apiece. I did not mention that. I should have mentioned.
Okay.
So they're technically worth -1 character points. They give you a point.
So they're minor compared to a full-on disadvantage.
They're very minor. They're not supposed to be meant as like handcuffs for your character. They're meant to make your character more human or more whatever species.
More
they
interesting
are.
to play.
Yeah, exactly.
More fleshed out.
You don't want to make You don't want to make a character that's boring. You want to make a character that's cool and fun and interesting. So that's what quirks kind of help one to do. And disadvantages. Disadvantages also make the character more unique. All right. Advantages and perks. A perk is basically it's like the opposite of a quirk. It costs you 1 point, but
a perk?
It does very minor things. Yeah, a perk. So it is a 1 point advantage. An advantage can cost any number of points of those 125 character points. So advantages and disadvantages can cost or give any number of points. A perk gives you 1, or a perk costs 1 point, and a quirk takes 1 point. Okay, and all of these 4 things basically give your character some kind of uniqueness, and literally an advantage would give your character an advantage in the game, like being more wealthy is an advantage, being stronger, being faster, being bionic, right? Disadvantages are going to come in a way that's going to be disadvantageous for your character, right? Has a bad temper, 1 leg, crippled some way, socially awkward. So low status. Having a low status is going to give you disadvantage points. Being poor, right?
Yeah, well, there's for a perk, for example, they're explaining it. No perk should provide wealth, social standing, or combat bonuses. So
right.
It doesn't affect actually dice rolling gameplay, but it affects role playing, I guess, and the feel. Or does it?
No, that's not totally true. we're not using any of the other books. We're just using the characters book right now. But there are perks that can manipulate dice rolling in a very minor way, like reaction rolls. It can mess with them. I very rarely ever use perks, and I don't really know anybody that I game with that uses them either.
Okay.
But they do have some kind of benefit to dice rolling in some areas. But yeah, they would definitely not give you any status, because 1 point of status is 5 points. If these are only 1 point apiece, it's not going to give you anything like that. Combat abilities cost more than that. So perk is only 1 point. That's the point of a perk. It's cheap and just, a little gimmick for your character.
Okay.
So this is something specific that I do. Your game master may not ever think about doing something like this, but I do this just to enforce role-playing and enforce an interesting character. I force the players, when they make their character, to pick 3 personality traits. And basically they have to pick three types of mental disadvantages or mental quirks. So it can be 3 1-point quirks that have to do with some kind of mental trait, psychological trait, or something like that, to make them interesting when they talk to people in the world, when they converse with one another. It's for role playing purposes.
Okay, so you need 3 mental disadvantages, because the disadvantages can be mental, physical, or there's different levels.
Right. And we'll get to that underneath. We'll explain each of those as we come to them. Each of the types of disadvantages, advantages, perks, where we'll talk about each one of them.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Those personality traits can be at any point level, so you can have them literally at quirk level, or 3 disadvantages that are worth a lot of points. It doesn't matter. I just like to do that because it gives the player incentive to role play an interesting character.
Okay.
Because I use those to give you character points after the game is over. Okay. That's how you level up your character in this game, is you role play well.
Right. It's not like other games where, I killed 5 orcs, I get X amount of XP, and then once I get a certain amount of XP, I advance. So it's not like that. So the GM awards points based on how well people role play. Now, and you already said this, I just want to restate it, because if anybody's watching or listening to this, as a reference to making a character, this is how Tony does it. This one line item where he's saying, I want you to have at least 3 personality traits of a mental type that are at quirk or disadvantage level are mandatory. Okay, that's right. The way you do it. The book doesn't say to do that, and other GMs may not ask that. So okay, all right.
In fact, the book states that your GM can put any cap on disadvantages or quirks they want to. I don't know if it actually says that he can disallow them completely, but it is certainly well within their right to do it. If they don't want to be messing around with disadvantages at all, they don't have to put them in there. But I think they're a good tool, so I use them. The next part is mental, physical, and mundane traits are allowed. What that means is all advantages, perks, disadvantages, and quirks are going to be classified in various ways. One is mental. Like there are mental advantages like photographic memory, physical advantages, being faster, and mundane could be status, right? Like we were talking about earlier. Mundane would be wealth. Things that don't fit into those 2 categories would be considered a mundane trait. There are social traits also, and I have them listed as they are allowed in this game, but they won't come up. So you'd basically be wasting your points. But it will make your character more rounded out if you want to put them there. The other three are cinematic, exotic, and supernatural traits are not allowed. These are other ways to classify advantages, perks, disadvantages, and quirks. Cinematic would mean that these are things that aren't normally, like, you can't do them in the real world. It's just so odd, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where they're jumping across bamboo shoots. It doesn't exist in reality.
Right.
But it may exist in your game if that's what you want them to do. If I tell everybody we're going to be playing high action game where you're basically like movie heroes, that would fit.
Right.
But it's not going to fit in this game because your life is on the line. It's supposed to be extremely dangerous. You're breaking into somebody's house. You aren't supposed to feel like it's cinematic where you can't lose. You're supposed to feel like I could be caught at any point in time in this.
Right.
It would not fit. It would not fit.
Okay. So, yeah. So
you're not going to be sliding down the staircase banister and jump kicking the guards or whatever. It's not going to fit in this game.
All right. Got it.
So the next two are exotic and supernatural. Well, even though they sound like they would be the same thing, they do have a difference in this. Supernatural would be like magic, psionics, things that are like that could be considered like in a spiritual realm.
Yeah, it says here that those supernatural advantages are impossible in nature and cannot be justified by science.
That's the way that they're going to explain it. I'm just going to explain it that it's not perceivable by man, right? You can't see these things. It's past nature. So I mean, it is a good explanation that they put in the book. But long story short, it's magic, psionics, any type of spiritual realm. It's not going to show up in this game. At least not for your character. Your character is a mundane, right? He's not a wizard. And honestly, this is not really they said it's fantasy, but it's not really magical.
Right. There's no magical, even though they say it's in fantasy, there's nothing magical that actually happens in the adventure.
Not in this game. All in a Night's Work, there's not really, you're not going to come into All in a Night's Work and rob the house as a wizard.
Right. Okay.
There's no magic. Exotic would be well past supernatural, but it doesn't have to be supernatural. It could be high tech biotechnology. Cybernetics would be considered exotics. Like in my cyberpunk game, there are literally exotics, meaning there are people that have like animal genes spliced into their cells to make expressive traits like fangs, bat ears, cat eyes, tails. So you can't be that in 1600s colonial Europe. So it's not allowed.
Okay. I like it.
You are allowed one talent at +4 max. This is another optional thing that's inside of the game. I believe it's located at the end of the... I forget what page it is, but basically what it does is you buy the talent at specific levels, and it gives you a specific skill set that you have on your character bonuses. So if you wanted to make a wizard, you could give him majory talent at whatever level, and whatever way that the GM dictates, it will make all of his spells levels go up.
Okay. And that's talents. All right, I'm looking that up right now.
It's I think it has its own page. Page 8. Okay, 89 talents. 89.
All right, and here is an example.
We'll talk about that.
Here's an example of a talent. It says healer, and underneath that, it would give you bonuses to the diagnosis, esoteric medicine, first aid, pharmacy, physician, physiology, psychology, surgery, and veterinary skills.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right. And it also gives you a reaction bonus to patients, both past and present.
Right, yeah, reaction bonus, right. And that would be, it would cost you 10 points per level of that particular talent. So.
Right. It's pretty expensive, but it's because it gives you a bonus on so many skills that is the reason why it costs so much.
Okay,
10 points a level is actually pretty expensive.
Okay.
So the last thing is there's no limit on the amount of points one can spend on skills and techniques, but a maximum of 20 individual skills is allowed at character creation. Reason for this is this is optional also. This is just something that I do. I've seen players give me character sheets with like 80 skills on them. And I'm like, you won't even remember you have these.
Right.
Just because you want to have an advantage over everybody else and be good at everything, that's kind of not the point. It's not real. That's not a very cooperative way to play the game, right?
Right.
Now this is a solo game, so that really doesn't matter. But if we were playing in a group, it's generally understood that you are a group, but you want to play as a team. That's the cooperative spirit of a role-playing game. You shouldn't be playing games or role-playing games competitively. That's my opinion. That's bad. It ends up causing problems. There are other games that you can play competitively, like Munchkin. That's a good game to play competitively. Right. It's just cards. Right. But a role-playing game, you want to have fun with everybody at the table and not like screw up their character or what the goals are in the whole entire game. You got to work together. And this limitation makes your character special. You want to make an interesting character. Don't make the best character, right? You want to make a good character. You want to make him be able to do what he needs to do in the game, but you need to make him interesting. You want to make a team player character.
Okay,
so that's why I do this. That's right. Just me, though.
All right. So one last question here on this part: what is a technique, as opposed to a skill?
Sure. So I'm going to explain how to purchase these things because as it is right now, I haven't even talked about either one of these. But there is a difference between a technique and a skill.
Okay.
A skill you buy, right? Broadsword is a skill.
Okay.
You put points in it, you learn broadsword. A technique would be back attack with broadsword.
Ah. Okay.
Right. So you can maybe do like a spinning attack with it. That would be a technique.
Okay.
So it's anything that fits within the skill itself, but you want to focus on to make your character better at that specific part of the skill. So a technique is a focal point, right? And it could be in any skill. There could be techniques for any skill, like chemistry. If you have the skill of chemistry, you know a little about chemistry over the broad spectrum of chemistry. But you could possibly have technique in making different types of acids, whatever.
Right.
Acid creation, right?
That's so. I was actually thinking acids, and you went the same direction. So that's interesting. But
so that can be as creative as the player wants it to be. As long as it's cool with the GM, it is a technique. As long as the GM is cool with it.
Yeah, I just looked in the book, and there's multiple combat and non-combat techniques, and it gives rules on how to create your own techniques. So.
Right. Last thing is equipment. You're going to start out with an amount of money dictated by the level of wealth your character has, but that does not necessarily mean that you are able to buy everything from that tech level because we already know the parameters the setting. You're in tech level 4, what seems to be 1600s colonial Europe. So you have access to buy equipment from tech level 0 all the way through tech level 4, but it has to fit the setting.
All right, so now we have the parameters of the type of game we're going to play and the type of character that or not the type of character, but the boundaries of the advantages and disadvantages and whatnot that we can do with the character. So, and the GM should establish this with GURPS players before they make their character. So now that we understand that, what would be the next step?
Character sheet.
All right.
Character sheet. So let's go from top to bottom. We'll hit everything. I'm going to be in, I think, chapter 1 here.
All right.
I think.
Can you
hit
like
1.
Hit like Control Plus on your? Or can you magnify the your web browser just to make it a little bit easier for people who are watching the video?
Sure. I think that is. That's the whole thing. So that's complete.
All right.
Okay, so make a character name. Player name's obvious. You should be able to figure that one out.
Right.
Character name, you can skip it if you want. We can come back to it.
Oh no, I already know what the name is because I've already got.
Okay, good.
But yeah, so to honor the 2 MIBs that have been helping me in my learning GURPS, the name of my thief will be Tony the Mook.
Tony the Mook. Okay.
It's Tony the Mook. That's his.
I'm honored.
Tony the Mook. That'll be the character name. That's a good street name for a thief. Tony the Mook.
Actually, that is kind of a good street name for a thief.
So to honor you guys.
Okay. Awesome. So you can go ahead and plop that in there.
So I've just added that. That's his street name. The player name will be Shane Plays. All right.
Shane Plays. Okay.
Let's do that too.
Okay. Occupation. That's whatever you think is good. Just remember, it's not going to show up in the game. But if you want to give yourself a freelance title or anything like that, that's perfectly fine.
He's a hopeful cat burglar.
Hopeful cat burglar. Okay.
Actually, let's say he is a he runs the streets.
Okay.
He's a street guy. So
since there's no classes in this game, something like that really is only there just like so if I picked up the character sheet and I'd never seen this thing before, it's immediately going to tell me something about what this character's all about.
Okay.
So if I picked up that character, runs the streets, okay, boom, I already know what I'm kind of getting myself into.
Okay.
No classes, no levels in GURPS.
All right. So the very important point. No classes, no levels in GURPS.
Right. And that is because that kind of system that kind of way of making a character is very system genre setting specific. It really would not translate very well for a generic game where you could literally run in any type of setting. If there were levels and classes and experience points and stuff and all that stuff, it becomes cumbersome and not translatable in a lot of instances. I mean, you could probably. I mean, there are. I think there are games in different genres and settings other than fantasy that have experience points and stuff like that. But for this game, I think personally, it's a more sophisticated way to play because you don't have to. GURPS is very based in reality. If it can't be realistically explained in some way, it's not in the game. And there's not a whole lot of ways that you can logically explain levels and experience points and classes other than what this game actually does for something of the equivalent. Breaks it down into a bunch of different skills. Your stats are much more important in this than in other games because your skills depend upon them. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Your age, let's take a look here. Your age can be whatever you think is logical, right?
Okay.
So everybody's a human in this, we would assume.
We will make him 25, just for whatever reason. He's 25. That sounds good to me.
Sure, sounds good to me too.
All right.
Age, if you pick a character that is too young or too old, it actually is considered a disadvantage or an advantage. Actually, I think if you're either a child or elderly, it's always considered disadvantageous. But what it ends up doing is it starts eating up your stats.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry about that because you're not either one of those things. Height, weight, eyes, hair, you pick them.
Okay. So let's make him just kind of average size, 5'11".
Now there is a rough chart that you can optionally use to pick a height and weight that's for your character's strength stat.
Ah, interesting.
And it's on page 18.
All right, let me look at this.
Again, it's optional. I use it just because it makes the character a little more logical. The range is quite wide for a human, but that's kind of the point. That's kind of the point.
All right, he's going to be 5'11", and I'm looking at this chart, and for a strength of 11, then he would be. I'm going to make him 5'11", and I'm going to make him average weight build and make him 180 pounds.
Cool.
And that way, that will put him at a strength of 11. Eyes blue, hair brown. Why not? Okay. There we go.
Does he have any other distinguishing features that you want to put on there?
He has a small scar on right cheek.
Okay. Right. Cool. Okay, so let's go to the stats. The basic attributes, and let's actually go to the page that they're on. Starts on page 14. And these 4 stats are probably the most important aspects about your character. Not because they're the most interesting or anything like that. They're what a lot of other aspects of your character are based off of.
Okay.
So when I say that the statistics in this game are more important than they are in many of the other role-playing games, I'm serious about that because like in other games it may, if you have like a 15 dex, it may just give you like a +1 die roll on something. That does not happen in this. Whatever these are is literally what you're going to be rolling against in situations on 3 6-sided dice. And that is the core mechanic in GURPS. Okay. 3d6 runs almost everything. And I'll show the statistics regarding what that means. But for now, while we're doing this, just know that average on anything in GURPS costs nothing. Okay?
Average.
So for this character, a 10 strength costs 0 points.
Okay.
It costs this character no points to have 10s in all of these.
Okay. And let's real quick, I want to explain most like let's use D&D as a reference because that's probably the most well-known, universally
Mm-hmm.
played role-playing game. In that you have
Right.
strength, dexterity, intelligence, charisma, willpower, and constitution. You have 6 actual attributes. In GURPS, you
It's
have 4.
it,
You have strength,
it's
dex.
willpower now.
Oh, what did I
It's
say?
called
Wisdom,
willpower.
wisdom,
You said
wisdom,
yeah.
not
You said
willpower. Yeah,
willpower.
wisdom. My bad. Yeah, wisdom. So I was looking at the will here on this character sheet. I think that threw me off. Yeah.
Right.
So it's wisdom. But anyway, in GURPS, you have 4 main attributes that you purchase, and then these other traits, hit point, willpower, I think perception and fatigue points are derived from
Mm-hmm.
the main. So that's an important point too. They're actually
Correct.
derived. So I already know because I based my guy on the weight range by build chart on page 18 of the starter set characters book that I want him to have a strength of 11. That's how I based his physical characteristics. So I'm
Okay.
going to go ahead and and now this spreadsheet that you've created automatically calculates this, right?
Correct.
Okay,
So
so
you
we're
put an
going to give
11
him an
there.
11, and it should.
Yep.
Yeah, so it cost me 10
So
points. Now, if I didn't have if I didn't have the spreadsheet doing everything for me, how would I know that that cost me 10 points?
on page 14,
Okay,
under strength, everybody has a strength stat. This is not optional. You don't pick if
right.
you want to buy a strength stat or not. Every sentient animal has a strength stat, and even some, if it's animated, it's going to have something like this. So
Okay,
robots, whatever. For every point past 0, it's going to cost 10 points.
okay,
For every point, excuse me, for every point past 10, it's going to cost 10 points. For every point beneath 10, it's going to give you 10 points. So for your character's 11 strength, it's going to cost you 10 points of the 125 points that I'm giving you to make this character.
okay. So I have
If you,
115 left now.
right. If
Okay,
you chose 9 instead, you'd be getting 10 points.
okay. And for example, I'm looking on page 14 and 15, and dexterity costs 20 points or gives you 20 points.
Right.
Intelligence is
Right.
20 points, and health is 10 points per level. So,
Correct.
all right,
And the reasoning for that is Dex and IQ are much more important than strength and health.
right,
In in the broad scheme of things, like strength and health may not be very important at all in some scenarios, but it may be more important in some games than others. But over the broad, you know, how much it's going to cost in the game as a whole, regardless of what tech level you're in, regardless of what setting you're in, that's the point cost for that particular stat. Maybe in a spacefaring game, strength isn't going to mean that much because you've got such great technology,
right.
you're not going to need it.
Okay,
But it's going to mean something to this because there's a lot of stuff is muscle driven. They barely got sails on ships and stuff like that. So
so uh, I want to point out a couple of things here on this character sheet. If people notice, because you've already got formulas built in, as soon as
right,
I set my strength stat, there's like the encumbrance uh, looks like that updated. If I'm understanding
yes,
that correctly, so that
correct,
so I'm not encumbered if I'm carrying 24 pounds. I'm lightly encumbered if I'm carrying 48 pounds, and I'm sure those have some sort of game rule in game
yep,
penalties if I'm encumbered. So, and that just means how much stuff I'm carrying. That's one thing I never, hardly anyone ever used the encumbrance rules, uses them in D&D, but it bugs me. It was like, well, I'm carrying 13 swords and, 12 suits of armor. And it's like, you are? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But anyway,
yeah, that's
let's just kind of go off that. All right. So let me ask you the other thing I wanted to point out or ask, I guess, since I'm trying to be a burglar, or a thief,
Mm-hmm.
obviously
Yes.
stealthiness is going to be important to me.
Yes.
So is that based on dexterity?
Yep.
Okay, so
Yes.
I want to give this guy, even though it's going to cost me a little bit, I want to give him 2 points extra in
Okay.
dexterity. So I'm going to take his dexterity to 12. So now I've spent 50
Okay.
points. I've spent quite a bit of my point build already. Um,
Mm-hmm.
now, if okay, when it comes to combat, like
Yes.
if I'm trying to hit somebody with a sword, um,
Mm-hmm.
or if I'm trying to hit them with a bow and arrow or a throwing knife, is there a
Right.
difference in, like in other games, one would use strength, one would use dex? How does
Mm.
GURPS work?
Well, pretty much every single one of the skills for combat, actually all of the combat skills are based off of dexterity. Every single one of them.
Everyone. Okay.
Strength, strength is strength has nothing to do with your skill. I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, there may be one skill that actually strength is based off of, but that is not what it's meant for. Strength
I
is
see.
for all of the other statistics that empower that skill. So if I let's say I have that 12 dex and I've got knife skill, the strength is going to dictate how much damage you do with it. Strength is going to dictate how much damage you do with any weapon except guns, like machines. A machine does its own damage. Machines have their own damage, but anything that actually is driven by your muscles, it's going to dictate the damage that it does.
Okay. So, all right. So that's what for now. I may swing back after I've done advantages and disadvantages and try to, you know, work on my traits some more. But right now, that's what I want to spend on my traits.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna leave IQ average, and I'm gonna leave health average. So um, it looks to me like strength is directly related to hit points here, if I'm
Yep,
reading that right. Okay.
that's correct.
Okay.
Strength is equal to hit points, but you can go. So your secondary characteristics is where we're going to go next, right?
Okay.
And that's all of these, right?
Okay.
These are the basic attributes. These are your secondary characteristics. Secondary characteristics, for the most part, all of this is derived from these.
Okay.
Got it? Okay.
Yes.
So hit points is equal to your strength.
Okay.
However, you can buy more or less hit points than your strength would dictate. How you would logically explain that could be in a myriad of different ways. Less body mass. He has natural strength in what little muscle fibers he has, so he's smaller, but he's what muscle he has, he's strong. He's just doesn't have a lot of body mass if he's got less. So you could put
Right.
and get you could take -2 hit points and you'd be getting 4 character points back for doing it. Or
Oh, so uh, you can even though the secondary traits or secondary attributes are derived from the primary attributes, you can still bump them up or down and
yep,
spend or get. Okay, okay, I didn't. Okay,
correct.
all right. I did not know that. So, so if I wanted another hit point, then I
Yep.
could. Okay, or if I want. Okay, cool.
That is optional. If you want, you can leave them the same. This this is not required to be messed with. These are you have to have a strength stat. If you don't mess with these, they're all tens,
Right,
tens, right?
right.
But these you don't have to mess with if you don't want to. If you don't want to add extra willpower or perception, you do not have to buy them, or you can take less if you want.
So I kind of like the idea of him not having the best willpower in the world. That's
Okay,
kind of how I
that's
envision it.
fine.
So I'm thinking about giving him a
Sure.
-1 on the on that to give me another 5 points back. So
Cool.
that just kind of seems to fit my concept of this guy. So
If it
he's not
fits the
exactly,
character concept, that's
yeah,
important.
he's not exactly dumb, but he doesn't have the greatest. Sometimes his wisdom isn't exactly there. So
There you go.
okay, so yeah, I think we're going to do that. Now perception, if is that like in other games? This is how I'm going to spot things, or maybe be able to read somebody else's character, or
So there are some skills that are based off of perception rather than intelligence. So it will be based. So any of the knowledge skills are going to be based off of IQ, but some of them end up becoming based off of perception instead. Observation, search, these skills, and in some cases, as the GM, I may tell you roll against this skill using your perception stat instead of your IQ because it makes more sense to use that in that situation. Perception is sight, smell, hearing, touch,
that being the
the
case,
senses.
I think I'm going to give him. For now, I may come back. I'm going to give him a couple of points in that. So,
Okay.
because that seems to fit what he's trying to do. So, but like I
Sure.
said, I may circle back because I know I'm already spending quite a bit of my points just in here. So,
So statistically, at a 12, your character has a 72.5% chance of succeeding if the difficulty is average on the task that you're doing.
right.
And the way that we determine this is remember what I was saying, that average costs 0.
Right.
So on 3 6-sided dice, there's a range from 3 to 18, where 10.5 is right dead center. So the mean, the average of these values is 10.5.
Okay.
10 will pop up, 10 or less will pop up 50% of the time on 3 6-sided dice.
So it's
And
very
we know the numbers and the percentage chance that each will roll going up and down in a bell curve.
right. Okay. And I like that. You a couple of weeks ago after you're on the radio show, we sat down and talked about it, and you explained how it's literally you got the bell curve, you got the standard deviations. It's very mathematically
Right.
precise, which I like that. So okay, and then of course you have perception, and then you have fatigue points. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
That's
so
correct.
how you've already explained to me, but for anybody who's watching, how are fatigue points different from hit points?
Fatigue points are so hit points are literally how much damage your body can take before the guy's going to black out or die or have a limb crippled or something like that. Fatigue points is, pretty much the holistic body's ability to be able to work for long periods of time. If you're fighting over a certain amount of time, your strenuous combat, you can lose a fatigue point, maybe 2, depending on how encumbered you are. You could lose more. Some tasks that are physically strenuous will just take fatigue points. Magic uses fatigue points. If there was any type of magic in this game, your fatigue points is literally how many magic points you've got before your character will end up start burning up as hit points instead. So you have this amount of fatigue points that you can use as a number of points that you can spend in magic, and then when that gets down to a certain point, you start burning up your hit points instead, like you're bursting blood vessels and stuff like that.
Right.
So
Okay. And you're also explaining. You had explained to me when you hit 0, and you touched on this just a little bit just now, but
right,
when you hit 0 hit points, you're not necessarily out. It's your
correct.
ability. You start rolling against, I guess, your fatigue to do you stay conscious, and then it also comes into your fatigue points. It gets to a point when you take a certain amount of hit points, whether you can stay alive or not. So it's not just like some games say 0 hit points, you're dead. And then some games say from 0 to -9 hit points, you're unconscious, and at -10, you're dead. And it's not that straightforward in GURPS. It's actually, your fatigue points give you an ability to either stay conscious or to stay alive as you lose hit points. Is that correct?
Almost. So
Okay.
it's your health stat. Your
Oh,
health
okay.
stat.
Okay.
Your health stat dictates how many fatigue points you have.
Okay.
But let's say, for example, your character's got 11 hit points. Okay.
Okay.
He gets dropped down to 0. He's got 0 hit points. He's going to have to roll against his health to stay conscious once he hits that point.
To hit 0. So you can, in GURPS, you can be at negative hit points and be conscious if you roll well enough against your health stat.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not gonna. That's not something you want to do.
Right.
And I'll explain that. Once you get to 0, you have to start rolling against health to stay conscious every time you do something strenuous. If you're going to try and move and crawl away, you're literally forcing yourself to stay awake to be able to get to someplace you want to do. If you just want to sit there and bleed and hold in your guts, then you don't have to. You don't have to keep on rolling. You're going to stay conscious. Once you go to negative hit points, you roll against health to stay alive. It's not staying conscious anymore. It's actually you're rolling against your health to stay alive.
Any negative hit point.
So -11 would be negative
my bad.
hit points.
Okay, all right. So that's considered negative hit points when you're negative.
Right.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I guess I should be more explanatory about that. So stat at negative, so -11. You could have negative hit points like -1, -2, -3, -4. Your hit points when they're at negative up until right before your stat hit points is negative is rolling to stay conscious. Below that, it's rolling to stay alive.
Okay, so that's how
below -11 would be rolling to stay alive.
Okay,
for your character.
Okay, so I can be at -11 and still be trying to stay conscious, but as soon as I go beyond -11, I'm rolling to stay alive.
-11 would be the start of you rolling to stay alive, so
Okay.
-11 would count. Before that, -10 would be consciousness.
But that is directly based on my hit points. So if I had 8 hit points, then
yes,
at -8 and lower, then I would be rolling to stay alive.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So now we see the direct relation that strength and health both have in combat, because it's your hit points are directly in direct relation with your strength, but your health is what you roll to stay alive. So a person that's both strong and healthy is going to have a better chance of staying alive in combat if they're taking damage. So it's not just health.
Okay. So is it, and again, I'm going to use D&D because a lot of people are familiar with D&D. You've played GURPS for years now. Is it easier, harder, or about the same to die in GURPS as it is D&D? Now, I'm not talking old school, Mincer rules or first edition. I'm talking about, D&D second, third, fourth, fifth edition. Is it harder or more difficult to die?
I don't know. I think it would be very subjective to answer that question, because it would be dependent on the GM and the setting that you're playing more than the actual game mechanics. If we're just talking about the game mechanics, it's probably easier to die in Dungeons and Dragons.
That's what I was assuming, but I didn't want to assume anything just from looking at the numbers. So, Because it sounds like with GURPS, you always have a chance.
I would say Dungeons and Dragons. I would say Dungeons and Dragons, and the reason is because Dungeons and Dragons, you're assumed to be fighting all the time.
Well,
right? I mean,
there is
you're in dungeons and there's dragons.
Well, there is that, but there's also with now with 5th edition, it's a little bit different because in 5th edition D&D, you have saving throws when you would normally be dying. But most D&D, when you hit a certain either hit point level or negative hit point level, you're just dead. Whereas with GURPS, it looks like you always have at least a chance to stay alive.
Chance, yeah. Right.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, all right, moving on.
Your hit point, but in D&D, there are levels, and you get hit point growth that is past the realms of what a normal human being can actually achieve, because he's for whatever way they want to justify it. He's so heroic he can take massive amounts of damage or whatever. In this, your hit points are really not going to be changing a whole lot. It is possible to add a point here and there after so many games. It is possible, but for the most part, that's your character's hit points, and that's how much they're going to be for his career for the most part.
Yeah, and to
they're not going to go up.
And to be fair, I'm metagaming a bit and knowing I'm building this character for one solo adventure. So I'm gearing Tony the Mook to that. But yeah,
for this game.
But if I knew that he would be going into a campaign of ongoing adventures, I may be building him a little bit different. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, okay, so I guess let's look at speed and movement real quick.
Speed and move. Okay, so both of these are derived from these. Speed is equal to your dex and your health divided by 4. And if you want, you can bump them up to just like your other ones if you want to. What speed will do is dictate your order in combat. Whoever's faster goes first.
Oh, okay. I assumed it was because I was like, why do I have a speed and a movement? So okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Move is actually directly derived from speed. So your speed is derived from dexterity and health, but move is derived from speed. The difference between them is subtle. I mean, if they really wanted to, they probably could have just had speed, but there is a subtle difference. The difference is move is going to dictate how many hexes you can move in a round, and encumbrance is directly going to be modifying your move. Encumbrance really doesn't modify your speed, but it does modify your move.
Okay, so I'm going to... Yeah, so speed is like your reflexes and your ability to react. Okay, so for now, I'm going to bump that up a little bit, because if he gets caught burgling, whether he lives or not may depend. Wow, that costs a lot.
Know this: a 7.5 on a speed is very fast.
All right, can I bump it?
Really fast.
Can I bump it by? Do the rules allow? Well, because I'm trying to do it in fractions. So do the rules allow that? Like if I wanted to go from 5.5 to 6, okay.
So if we were playing, usually you're supposed to be putting in 0.25 intervals.
Okay, I'm gonna spend 10 points and bump it to 6.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
If we were playing a cinematic game, now if you remember from the sheet I showed you before, this is not a cinematic game because you're supposed to be feeling like you could die at any point in time.
Right.
If we were playing in a cinematic game, this would have no limit. Like you could, if it was like a superheroes game, you could be the Flash and put, whatever, right? You could put whatever you want in there.
You could be a Neo from the Matrix.
Yeah. Sure, exactly. But These derived statistics, they typically have a cap on how much you can bring them past the average that you purchased with your basic attributes. So when I say that, I mean probably not very realistic for this. When you have an 11 strength, have 18 hit points, that can't be logically explained. In a cinematic game, maybe it is, but for the purposes of this, usually they cap it like 30% past what the average is.
Okay.
So you could put 3 hit points in here, and that would literally be the max you would ever be able to get. We couldn't logically explain having any more hit points than this on this character because of his strength. If you bumped his strength up, now that's a different story.
Okay.
Because you can keep bumping these up while your character is in play.
Because the GM will award you points while you play, and you can invest them back into your character.
Correct. That's how you increase your character in this game, since there are no classes or levels.
Right, levels. You don't level up. You just spend points as you accumulate them. Okay. So, all right. Looks like next is reaction modifiers.
Yeah. I'll be bluntly honest with you. You're breaking into a house. You don't want to get a reaction modifier at all. You don't want to you don't want a reaction roll. That means you did something wrong.
Right. Well, assuming that, for the sake of the teachability of
completion.
This video, yeah. Right. I was looking here. I had an appearance. Yeah, here's a physical appearance. For example, if I wanted to buy an appearance level of attractive on page 21, you don't enter beauty contests, but are definitely good looking. This gives you a +1 on reaction rolls, and that would cost me 4 points. Or you could be very handsome or very beautiful, or you could be hideous. And hideous would give you -4 on reaction rolls, but it would give you 16 points to add to your character. I'm going to be, because this fits how I perceive my character, not very good, not handsome or very good looking, but just attractive. He's got a little bit of, and that's helped him in the streets. And I guess the level is +1, and the cost is 4 points. So that cost me 4 points. Yeah. So, and that gives me a +1. So I assume that's what that level 1 means.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why that went up 1 point, because in any situation where a reaction roll is necessary, if it's another human being,
right,
you're gonna get a +1 on the reaction roll, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, maybe. Personally, I very rarely use reaction rolls, but that's just a personal choice. Some people use them all the time. That's okay. I like to keep my NPCs controlled by me. Normally, when I use a reaction roll, it's because I want to let the dice decide how that person is going to react, as opposed to something I know the way the character is going to behave.
Okay.
So reaction rolls are basically for mooks.
Okay.
Pun intended. Well, no pun intended.
Yeah,
whatever.
I got you. But for in-game terms, I mean, a lot of the rules I see are based around reaction rolls. So, you do want to, there's a lot of GMs may use it pretty heavily. How does this person react to you? So either so charisma. I don't even see charisma in here. Or how would
charisma is an advantage, but honestly, anything that costs points in this game is an advantage.
Right, but this
so
is go ahead.
Charisma is actually in the advantage chapter.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So it costs 5 points per level, and each level gives +1 on all reaction rolls made by sapient beings. So It's
Yes.
you just say, okay, so I'm not, since this is a one-off adventure. Now, if I was going to be playing this guy in a campaign, I would be giving him a little bit of a charisma because that's how he gets out of
More charisma.
sticky situations. But in this,
Sure.
he's not going to buy any. Now, I set his status at 0 because we said when we were establishing the parameters, he starts at status 0, right? Which is just a normal person, like
Sure.
you and I in real life are status 0 dudes. So,
Right.
okay, and then build. I see in the rules that you can be skinny, average, overweight, fat, or obese, and that can
Right.
and um, that has some game modifiers. But I'm just going to be average. I'm just going to be average build. So
Yeah, you kind of already dictated he was
yeah,
average build
when I
with
did,
this anyway.
right,
So, and you know, like I said earlier in GURPS, anything that's average is costs 0.
right.
If you're an average, it doesn't cost anything. So that's something to keep in mind while we're looking at all of these new things. Is if you don't mess with it, it's not going to cost you anything.
Right. All right. So unless you want to talk any more about reaction modifiers, it looks like we're down to one of the meatier sections of character creation, which is advantages and disadvantages.
I will just say real quick: the reaction roll is what the GM will roll for a player when the player meets a new character, pretty much for the first time, that the GM does not have a concrete built personality for and knows how he's going to react to the person. It's a random reaction and totally modifiable by your character's attractiveness, status, charisma, and the way they look, the build.
Okay. And so, okay. So, but you said your personal style as a GM, you don't use reaction rolls as much as some other GMs might.
Correct.
Okay.
That's just me personally.
Yeah, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong. You like to role play, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. One thing I've learned over the years is a lot of role playing game stuff is subjective. It's neither right nor wrong. It fits the style of the
Yep,
GM and the
that's
players.
absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay,
That's
so we're at advantages and disadvantages, and there's a ton. I mean, there's 2 pages back to back, small print of all these advantages, and then there's a whole separate disadvantages. Now, I mentioned before. I think you and I were talking before we started recording. One of the reasons I'm not intimately familiar with this book yet is I purposefully tried not to study it too much because I wanted this to be spontaneous in the questions I asked, and I wanted to ask questions that somebody watching the video might ask. So, but now I know. So I'm going to look through quickly. And while I'm doing this, do you have any particular advantages that are some of your favorite advantages or that you think are interesting while I'm kind of looking?
um honestly, when I'm making characters, I don't really focus on the advantages too much. I like because the disadvantages are the ones that let you role play better.
Okay, I see.
Um, uh, I like spending the points on the stats and the skills more than the advantages themselves. But there are some good ones are if you're you should be looking for advantages that are going to not just benefit your character, but explain them better, right? I mean, it could these can be used in the same way that a disadvantage can. It can flesh the character out more, like you stated earlier. Like this character is a thief character, street guy. I know that there is a advantage in here called hard to subdue.
Yeah, I was looking at that one actually. Yeah, yeah.
High manual dexterity is a talent for I think like technology stuff. I think it will help pick locks. Maybe you might have to look at that.
I also I'm looking at
Danger
Daredevil.
sense,
Yeah, I was looking at Daredevil and Danger Sense for a thief. Those could be helpful. Um, let's see here.
night vision.
There's a lot of interesting stuff. Jumper might be helpful. I'm just kind of looking through here.
So jumper, I don't think is what you think it is. Jumper is a supernatural ability.
Oh yeah, it
It's
says
actually being
soup.
able to
Yeah.
jump through dimensions or times or something like that.
I like the luck
Yeah.
advantage. Luck could be interesting. Um, he might think
Luck
of it.
is what you would use in is what you would use in a cinematic game, though it wouldn't be in this.
Okay.
Now that is one thing that I should say that hasn't popped up until right now. If you'll notice on this page, it will say on the top of the list advantage, and then it gives the list of advantages, and then MP
Uh-huh.
SOC.
Uh-huh.
So that's mental, physical, or social,
Uh-huh.
and it tells you if it's mental, physical, or social. The next one is X or soup, which is exotic or supernatural. If you'll notice, it doesn't say anywhere whether it's cinematic or not.
Right.
That actually, to me, was an oversight.
Yeah, well, it doesn't even like when I was looking in the advantages in the beginning, it mentions cinematic, but you evidently you have to actually read the description
Yes,
of the trait or
yes,
the advantage to know if it's cinematic or not.
that's correct, and that I think was unfortunately a mistake because that would be very helpful for them to have put that in there.
Mm. Now luck is showing. Now there's super luck, which is
Mm-hmm.
supernatural, but
What
there's a
page are
regular.
you?
I'm on page
What?
298. But now there's a
Okay.
luck that is just mundane and it's not exotic or supernatural. But there's a super luck that is supernatural. Um,
Yeah, that's like stuff falling out of the sky into your hat,
right.
type of deal. Like you can control reality. Good luck.
Yeah. So for those if anybody who's listening to this or watching this, and just to let you know, the superpowers. There's no separate
Mm-hmm.
section on superpowers. This stuff is listed in the advantages, and then it'll either be
Right.
marked as supernatural or exotic. So there's not like a whole separate table of superpowers. The advantages are all lumped up under one thing here, but you got flight, and you got ultravision and all, and they're just advantages that you buy like anything else. So let's see here.
And it's done that way specifically, I think, because if they set up a section that was just like superpowers, it would imply that only people with superpowers were going to be able to do these things, and
Right.
that is not what the book is implying. The book is implying that these are advantages, and you're not necessarily making a human being when you're making this game. This could be a unicorn.
Right.
Right? You could be making a titan that
Right.
has like lightning. He could throw lightning. Well, it's
Right.
not necessarily it's not a superpower for it. It's not a superhero. That's just an inborn supernatural ability that it has.
Right.
So
Yeah. No, I love the
that's
elegance.
what.
If I had to describe, I love how elegant and fine-tuned these rules are. I've been
Right.
impressed with that based on what you've told me and what I've read. What I'm going to do, Tony, I'm going to pause the video while
Sure.
so that people aren't like listening to me read through all these descriptions, and we'll unpause and then share with everybody what advantages I chose to take. So,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, you and I will of course
Yeah, that's
continue
fine.
talking. Okay, so through the magic of time, it was instantaneous for our viewers, but Tony, you and I took a few minutes and went through and chose my advantages. And
Mm.
so what I chose for the time being, I may have to circle back because this is starting to add up, is let's see. I took Danger Sense, which is going to cost me 15 points. And what that does is it allows the GM to roll against my perception secretly if something is happening that may be bad, that may give me a heads up that something's about to happen. I guess in some genres or some settings it may be like an ESP kind of thing, but I guess in this he's just very alert and has kind of almost a sixth sense of something ain't right here. I'm guessing that's how it would fit into this. Okay, I took Daredevil, and that's also 15 points. And what Daredevil allows me to do is, let me find it. Fortune seems to smile on you when you take risks. Anytime you take an unnecessary risk, which would be your opinion, Tony, is if it's unnecessary or not, I get a +1 to all skill rolls. Furthermore, I may re-roll any critical failure that occurs during such high-risk behavior. So, for example, I guess if I was Han Solo and charged all the stormtroopers onto the Death Star, or I decided to jump across a rooftop or something like that with 3 people chasing, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. So, all right, I took Hard to Subdue, which you and I both kind of noticed that one as we were looking through the list. And what that means is it's harder to knock my character out. It says that you're hard to knock out. Each level of Hard to Subdue gives +1 to any health roll to avoid unconsciousness, whether as a result of injury, drugs, ultra-tech weapons, etc., and to resist supernatural abilities that cause unconsciousness. In a realistic campaign, the GM may wish to limit characters to Hard to Subdue 1 or 2. I took 2 levels of this, and it was at 2 points per level, so that cost me 4 points. And then finally, I took High Manual Dexterity, which for 5 points a level, I have remarkably fine motor skills. Each level to a maximum of 4. That's by the book, not by Tony. I guess Tony could do it however he wants. Gives +1 to dexterity for tasks that require a delicate touch. This includes all dex-based rolls, which would include, among other things, knot tying, lock picking, pickpocket, and sleight of hand, which definitely fits what I'm trying to do with my character. And it is at 1 point for level, or 5 points for level, and I took 1 level. So that's going to cost me 5 points. 1, and that cost me 5 points. So what's our point cost here, Tony? What are we looking at?
So you've spent 108 points total so far.
Okay, I've already spent now is that already calculated on the, okay, yeah, you've got it already calculated up here. Okay, so I have 125 I can spend, which I haven't yet, so that leaves me with 17 points, and we haven't done disadvantages yet. So,
Right.
and now let's explain, kind of give an overview of disadvantages, which you've already touched on it, but let's remind anybody who's watching, and then we'll do the same thing. We'll pause the video and pick out some disadvantages. And I know can you pull up that that guideline sheet again, because you actually as a GM require, I think, at least 3 of a certain type.
So I ask that all of the players, when they make their character, take 3 personality traits. They can be at quirk level or disadvantage level, which means the point cost for these can be any that you want. I don't care. I just want to see something that makes your character not a clod, right? He has to have some kind of personality, or he's not gonna. You're not gonna be able to role play him.
Okay.
And role playing is how you get character points in this.
Okay.
One of the ways.
One of the
the
ways.
main way you get character points. Yeah, one of the ways. The main method you get character points in this game.
Okay. So, all right. So here's some potential disadvantages. I'm just gonna go through some here just for the fun of it, and then, like I said, we'll stop and I'll pick some out and then we'll resume the video. You've got absent-mindedness. That would be a mental one. You have callous. That would be a mental one. You've got chronic pain, compulsive behavior, color blindness, You have distinctive features. You can be a killjoy. You can be a klutz. You can be jealous. You can have a guilt complex. You can be a glutton. You can have G intolerance. I guess that's like a space tech, like when you're
Yeah,
pulling
right.
G's from being in a rocket. Um, you can be fat. You can be fanatical. You be a kleptomaniac. You can be manic depressive. Um, you can have a split personality. You can have unusual biochemistry. You can have restricted vision. You can be a sadist. You can have a secret identity. You have no sense of smell or taste. You can be nosy. You can be oblivious. So there's just a wide range of disadvantages. You're unhealing. I guess you don't heal as well. You're a weirdness magnet. You attract weirdness. You're a workaholic. So there's just a ton of disadvantages you can take here to not only get points that you can spend on your character, but to also help round out your character, right? Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, and then Tony and I are going to figure out what disadvantages that we should take for Tony the Mook, my character. Is it before we pause the video? Is there anything you want to say specifically about disadvantages, Tony?
No, that just about covers it. Personally, I think disadvantages are more important than the advantages, just because they're what give you the opportunity to make a role playable character. The advantages are, for the most part, mechanical. They give you bonuses on die rolls and stuff like that.
They're more of the
They're,
power fantasy side of things.
Yeah, disadvantages gives you stuff to role play with a lot. I mean, I always pick the mental disadvantages, but like the sheet that I wrote earlier, there are the same type of it that there are advantages, there are disadvantages. Mental, physical, mundane, social, cinematic, exotic, supernatural. There are those in disadvantage form too, like um, G tolerance would be a physical trait for mostly for science fiction games. Killjoy is another physical one for for a far future game. Supernatural, magic susceptibility, being able to be more susceptible to any type of magical attacks. So all of these things, those aspects are for all the advantages, perks, disadvantages, and quirks. But the disadvantages and quirks, I like those better.
And I agree with you, Tony, that the disadvantages and things that force you to role play or can force situations to be more uncomfortable lead to some really great gaming moments. So,
Yeah,
um,
fun.
yeah, fun. Yeah, fun. And on sheer game terms, just from a sheer rules way, it's a way for GURPS to balance out. Hey, I've got all these advantages. Well, if you want to afford those, you're going to take some disadvantages too. So people have rounded out characters. But all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video unless you want to add anything else to that.
I'd like to add. I'd like
Yeah,
to add one other thing.
yeah, go ahead.
This, this is the way that the system gives you incentive to make a funner character to role play. By taking disadvantages, you're giving yourself a chance to make a character that's going to have those chances of funner situations that you normally wouldn't pick, and it's going to give you points on top of it, so you can make your character more capable in other areas to boot. So it's to your advantage to buy disadvantages.
Cool.
If that
Yeah.
makes any sense, it's
Well,
actually
yeah,
to your advantage to buy disadvantages.
yeah, because you role play and by role playing you can get awarded points that you can invest back in your
Yep,
character. So yeah, works on a
that's
role
right.
playing and a game level. So excellent. All right, well I'm going to go ahead and pause it, and we're going to pick out some disadvantages for Tony the Mook, and we'll be back. Okay, so we're back from the magic land of pausing the video, and chose 3 mental traits that were disadvantages to go along with what the GM has asked for. And what I did was I took, for disadvantages, I took curious, and it says you're naturally very, very inquisitive. This is not the curiosity that affects all player characters. For example, what's in the cave? Where did that flying saucer come from? But the real thing, what happens if I push this button? Make a self-control roll when presented with an interesting item or situation. If you fail, you examine it, even though you know it could be dangerous. In general, you do everything in your power to investigate any situation with which you aren't 100% familiar, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this has a point cost of -5, and as you indicated, Tony, it also has an asterisk next to, and when I say you indicated while we were talking, while the video is paused, so help us understand what that asterisk means.
Okay, so for both of these skills, or not skills, but both of these disadvantages, they're variable, and that the variability indicates the optional severity of the disadvantage. So at -5 for these both of these specific disadvantages, it's at the normal listed severity.
Okay.
You can go higher than that point value or lower than that point value. Whichever choice you take is going to either give you less or more points. At the level you took both of these at, it's at the standard given severity, which means
I have to
that,
roll a 12 or under in order to not give into it.
right, if the temptation for either of these in either one of our estimations comes into play in the game, and it would behoove you to not give into your temptation, you may opt to roll the dice to see if you can fight the urge to be that way. Normally, for under all normal circumstances, you're supposed to try and role play these at all times.
Right.
This is how I give you character points at the end of the game. Were you curious? Were you overconfident? Did you like shiny silverware? If those end up being yeses, then I give you character points for good role playing at the end of the game. And those character points are the exact same points that we're using to buy all of this stuff. However, but let's take, for example, something really bad is taking place that you shouldn't be curious about. That shiny button, that might be the on and off switch to a nuclear, like some kind of safe switch for a nuclear reactor or something like that, is to keep the thing with water on it so it doesn't get dry or melt down, or I don't know, right?
So
pushing that button probably is a bad idea. So that would be.
Boy, do I sure want to. One of my favorite episodes of Ren and Stimpy is Space Madness, where they have the Jolly Candy-like button. Have you seen that one? And he's like, he just wants to press that button so bad, and he can't stand it. The Jolly Candy-like button. So, just for my reference, anybody who's watching this, where is the self-control chart where you're getting that 12 from? Because I see it scattered around some of the disadvantages, but I don't see one overall chart for the self-control.
On the very bottom of page 120, this is where it starts explaining it, but on 121 it actually gives the cost at the very top of 121.
Oh, okay. 6, 9, 12. Okay, got it. All right.
So the listed cost for overconfident and curious are both 5 points. So at the listed cost, you resist quite often, roll of 12 or less. If you would have taken you resist quite rarely, roll of 6 or less on 3 6-sided dice, it would have been double.
They would have been worth 10 points each. Okay.
It would have been yes.
Okay.
And that's much more severe. That Jolly Fun Time button would have been almost impossible for you to resist.
The Jolly Fun Time button. I love that. Okay, so, and then I took Overconfidence, which is another self-control thing where you believe that you are far more powerful, intelligent, or competent than you really are. You may be proud and boastful or just quietly determined, but you must roleplay this trait. You must make a self-control roll anytime the GM feels you show an unreasonable degree of caution. If you fail, you must go ahead as though you're able to handle the situation. I receive a +2 on all reaction rolls from young or naive individuals, but -2 on reactions from experienced NPCs. So that's interesting. Okay, and then the likes shiny silverware is just a quirk. That doesn't mean that I have to roll for it or anything like that to resist.
No.
But I do, if I'm in a situation where I can either look at or probably steal shiny silverware, my character is going to try to do it, and that gave me a -1. So I went from I had spent 108 points to now I'm down to 97. Or I'm back to 97. So I still have 28 points left that I can spend on my character.
That's right, and with 28 points, you're looking pretty good. You can make a pretty capable character with that much. And to briefly go over what Quirks is, or Quirks are, Quirks are really cool. They're just a little minor feature about your character that makes your character more human. They're not severe. They're not a handicap, but there's something for you to role play and give you an extra point just for saying that you are this way. It's another way that the system gives you an incentive to make a character more interesting and fun to play. And you have probably even more choices with Quirks than I know you have more choices with Quirks than you do with anything else in this game, because Quirks can literally be almost anything you can think of.
Want them to be.
Yeah, likes, dislikes, nosy. I mean, any of the disadvantages can be at quirk level pretty much. I mean,
yeah, I could have taken more than one.
If you can stat it. Yeah, absolutely.
I could have taken
5.
Yeah, I could have taken multiple. Yeah, I could have taken multiple likes if I wanted. So, okay. So at this point, do we want to go to perks or do we want to go to languages? Or I'm not sure. I'm going to take a perk, but
you know what? To be honest, I don't really think there are very many perks in the character's book anyway for you to take.
Yeah, it's on page 100.
Out an extra.
Yeah, there's hard.
I don't think there's very many of them in this book. It's in the other books they have more. So there's really not a whole lot. But for completion's sake, on this character sheet, I wanted to have that in there because they're kind of like the polar opposite of a quirk. Those actually help you all the time in a very, very minor way, as to where quirks can be somewhat. They don't necessarily help you. They can hurt you sometimes, but not very often.
Well, just like you said, just for completion, I just took the perk Honest Face.
Okay, there you go.
Which could help. It says you simply look honest, reliable, or generally harmless. This has nothing to do with your reputation among those who know you or how virtuous you really are. You won't be. It says people who don't know you will tend to pick you as the one to confide in, or not pick you if they are looking for a potential criminal or troublemaker. You have a +1 to trained acting skill for the sole purpose of acting innocent. So there we go, which would fit what I want to do with my character pretty well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So and now languages. I don't know for the purposes of this game how important languages will be, but just to have the discussion, what
almost nothing.
Yeah.
But I will talk about them.
Yeah. So let's look at languages.
Okay, so if you go on page 23, that's where it starts, but it's mostly talked about on 24.
Okay.
So your character is going to start out with whatever language is going to be, whatever his birth language is, his mother tongue. We'll put common here.
Yeah,
just because.
We'll call it common, right? Okay.
We'll call it common just because. I would venture to say that he's in colonial England in the 1600s, but
works for me.
We'll just keep it at common.
We'll call it common. Okay, all right.
We'll call it commons, and you start out with it it costs you 0 points because you're starting with this, and the default for your beginning mother tongue is going to be native level, spoken, and literate.
Okay.
Okay. Now you can like I said, this doesn't cost you anything, but normally this would cost you 5 points
To be native and literate in something.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. None,
Like it would normally
broken,
cost you 5.
accented, native. The point cost assumes you
If you
rewrite.
took another language, you would spend points on how well you speak it and how well you write it.
Okay,
If you're completely illiterate,
just for the sake of people seeing, let's say since I'm in colonial England, let's say I speak a little bit of French. Let's say
okay.
Let's say I can speak broken French, and I'm semi-literate, which is the written comprehension of broken. So I can speak broken French, and I'm semi-literate in French. What would that cost?
Okay, so broken is the lowest level of
Right,
spoken. There's 3 levels for each language. Well, technically, there's 4 levels. None, which
right.
is
It's
every other
0
language that you
points.
don't know.
Oh, this is
That
2.
doesn't cost you anything. You don't know it.
So broken is 2
Then
points.
there's
Is that right?
broken.
Yeah.
That's correct. Okay. Then there's accented. Okay.
That's 4
And then there's
points,
native.
which is 6
Okay.
points.
So
Okay.
I made a mistake here. That actually would be 6 normally, not 5. Okay. And I'll tell you why in a second.
All right.
Because each one of these levels assumes that you can read at the same level that you can speak. So if you're at broken speaking ability, but you can't write it at all, it's 1 point, not 2.
Okay.
Okay. But if you're broken spoken and semi-literate broken level, that would be 2 points.
Okay. All right. So just since we've explained that, that's fine. I don't want French, obviously. We can just delete that out of there. But I was just trying to go through the exercise but I'm speaking basically common English, and I get one language starting that I am a native speaker and I'm literate written, and it costs me nothing, and then everything additional costs. Okay. Up to the GM. GM may rule that even the starting, if you want to be literate starting, there may be some reason why he would say you have to pay for that, or she. It's up to this. It's up to the setting.
Right. In fact, in 3rd edition, you had to buy it no matter what, because it was assumed that you were always going to start out as a literate. If you were a literate person, you had to pay points for it. I can totally understand that. At this point, it doesn't cost you anything. But in some games, the GM may tell you you're starting at illiterate, and you have to buy the literacy up.
Well, and really, if you wanted to, I'm just speaking in general. You could require that here, because in tech level 4 and below, it's like a lot of people weren't literate. A lot of people weren't literate. Especially, I'm saying my guy's a street dude running around on the street. So, all right, skills. Look at this.
I think we're ready for skills.
All right. So let's have a general discussion of skills, and then we'll do what we've been doing.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Okay, so I may have to flip back and forth between the stats here, but let's look at the stats here first, because these numbers and these numbers are going to really, well, not the hit points and the fatigue. So these numbers and these numbers are going to be dictating your skill level.
Which ones again? The strength dex. Which one? Okay.
The highlighted ones I've got here.
Okay.
Strength, dex, IQ, health, will, power, and perception are going to be the statistics that build your skills up. Most of them are going to be dex and IQ. That's why it costs so much. That's why those stats cost more than any of the other ones.
Because they affect so many other things. Okay.
Right. That's right. So let's go back to skills. What I would like you to do, because we need an example, is find a skill that you know you're going to take.
Okay.
And if you're already looking in the book, you know that you have a lot of skills to choose from.
Yeah. Let's go ahead, and because I'm definitely going to take sleight of hand or slate of hand. So let's use sleight of hand as an example.
Okay, sleight of hand. Now, if memory serves correct, you actually have a talent that gives you a bonus on this, right? Manual dexterity +1.
Look at you go.
Okay,
Yep,
so
that's correct. Yep.
For this particular skill, you're going to get a +1 on there. That's what I put that little box for.
Okay.
Okay. Sleight of hand.
That's on page 221.
Is a dex-based skill.
Okay.
Let me see it's at DX hard. Okay, so the stat that covers sleight of hand is dexterity. It says so on page 221. Sleight of hands, DX/hard. Hard is the difficulty for the skill, and I have it as H here. So there's 4 different levels: easy, average, hard, and very hard.
Yeah. Okay. And it says under the skill, I'm just because I'm trying to connect all this. It actually lists.
Right.
It says in the book it says sleight of hand, and under that it says DX/hard. So that's where you got that from. Okay.
Correct. Now I have all of the information that I need to when I put all of this in here for this skill to work. Okay.
Okay.
Your character right now, with his talent and no points put into the skill, has a level 7. Okay. What that means is if your character is performing sleight of hand and there's no difficulty modifiers or anything like that, like me putting a negative or a positive modifier because of the difficulty for that particular task, when you roll a 7 or below, you succeed.
Okay.
On
3 6-siders. Okay.
Because 3 6-sided dice runs pretty much every mechanic in this game. 7 in statistical chance, 7 is equal to about 26% of the time. Okay. So with no skill at all, because he's talented and because he's slightly agile, he's pretty agile with a 12, he's naturally okay. I mean, he doesn't pass half the time, he's not really good, but he's better than most average people because he's talented and he's dexterous. Otherwise, it'd be even lower than this because sleight of hand is a hard skill, right? It's hard. If it was easy,
it would be at 9. Makes a big difference.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that's almost average, the 9, because 10 is average.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So,
right. 10
okay.
is average.
So, all right, so how do we calculate what it costs to raise that?
Right. That's the next question, right? That's the next question. Okay, so let me get you to the page that we look on for this. It's on page 170.
All right.
Okay, on the bottom of page 170.
Okay.
Right?
Hard.
Bottom of page 170. This little tiny matrix basically covers the skills for this whole game, pretty much.
All right, and
there's attribute.
There's a little.
You plug in the attribute, and then how many points you put into it.
All right, hold on. So let me show that. This is what he's talking about on page 170. There's a little matrix here that controls everything on the point cost. All right.
Yeah. So, if you were to buy this, which I'm assuming you're going to, the amount of points you put into it is completely up to you. You can put 0 and not know the skill at all, or you can put 20. Doesn't matter. Let's say you put 1 point in there. Okay. substantial jump, right? It
Yeah,
went
from
from
7 to 11. Yeah.
7 to 11. Okay, so what happens? Okay, so if you look on the matrix, 1 point put into a hard level skill, is equal to your attribute -2. Okay, 1 point in a skill is equal to your attribute -2. So putting 1 point in there would equal dexterity -2,
So it cost me
which
10
is
points.
10.
Okay.
No, your level would be 10. But since
Oh,
you're
oh,
since you have a +1 on talent, it bumps it up to 11.
oh. So it's not the cost. That's the what it ends
Your
up being.
skill level.
So every
That's your
point.
skill level.
So every point, and by that, every point that I put into it is purely one. Like if I have 20 points left, then I would have put 1 point into sleight of hand, and I've got 19 points left to spend.
Yeah.
Okay, but my
Right.
level is 11 based on
Yes.
that matrix because
Right.
it's your attribute 1 point by that chart. And there's a little, you say, okay, I put 1 point into it under hard, and then it tells me that the level is the attribute -2. So dexterity
Right.
-2 would be 10, but I'm talented, and it gives me a +1 because I have that high manual dexterity. So my
Right.
at for 1 point of character building points, I get a level of 11, which is pretty sweet.
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm gonna put
So,
2 points into that.
okay, so that's going to give you a level 12, and statistics. Statistically, that is actually 171 has the statistics actually right
Yeah, I
there.
see that. Yeah,
Success. So 12 to 74%. Then like
nice. Yeah, there's
12 will pop up 74% of the time on 3d6. 12 or below,
right.
which is what you want to do. You want
So
to hit that level or below on 3 6-sided dice to pass.
right. So what we have here is on this page, there's the matrix we talked about that if it's hard and you spend this many points, it's the attribute minus or plus or whatever. On the next page over is the statistical probability, and at 12, as he said, it's 74.1% probability of success. So this is a very mathematically precise game, um, and ahead of time, what your chances are. So,
Right.
okay, so now that we've established that, let's unless there's anything you want to mention about skills, let's pause the video. We'll pick out some skills and come back.
No, I think I explained everything that I can think of. Maybe I'll think of something while we're looking for
Right.
skills for you, but
All
yeah,
right.
that's about it.
All right. I'm going to pause the video. All right. So that was the skills thing due to the magic of pausing the video that we just, it was probably about 20, 25 minutes, something like that. But what I did was, and we're at a point build of exactly 125 now. I talked with Tony while the game was, or the video was paused, and the total points is at 125. And I asked him, I said, after skills and techniques, which I'm not going to take any techniques for this character, techniques allow you to get bonuses on a pool of different skills. So I'm not going to do that. But after skills and techniques, we're basically done spending points if I didn't want to circle back and spend points on any of my stats or advantages or disadvantages or any of that. So what I took was, let's see, can you kind of scroll that up, Tony, to see all the skills that I took?
You're not seeing it?
Is acrobatics the? Oh, it looks like you alphabetized it. Okay, I see what
Yeah,
you're
I
doing.
just
Yeah.
alphabetized them so
Okay.
they're in
Yeah. No.
order
No. 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 That's
to go
great.
in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. So we took let's see, acrobatics, climbing, fast talk, garrot or garret, depending on how you want to spell it. That's where you can kind of use the string, come up behind somebody and go around their throat. Jumping, knife, lockpicking, pickpocket, scrounging, short sword, sleight of hand, stealth, and thrown weapon specialized in knife. And these are the points that I put into it. You'll see that I put 8 points into stealth for a total level of 14, which is quite good. Where's that? At 14, I have a 90.7% chance at any given time of passing that on a, if there's no modifiers or something like that. So given that I'm a thief and I know that I'm going to be breaking into somebody's house, that's a smart skill. But I also wanted to make sure that all of the skills I took were at least average, which is 10 or better, and you can see here that that was done. So every skill is at a 10 or higher. Now here's, just for reference, here's some skills I didn't take because they would be like long game or campaign type skills. Gambling, poison, smuggling, and streetwise. So I didn't take those because I figured that was more of like if I was going to have an ongoing character. Now, we had an interesting discussion while the video was paused on how do I how do I find, like, what skill do I use to search? Like in D&D or something, there's search, or investigate, and I'm trying to think that way. Well, there's a couple of skills. One's called search, where I grab that, but it turns out that's for searching a person. I don't want that, not for this game. And then there was another one called scrounging, which is kind of an ability to scrounge stuff. Like, hey, we need 2 car batteries and a tube of toothpaste as soon as possible, so you have the ability to go scrounge stuff up. That didn't really fit. So, it looks like it's perceptive. Like if you go into a room and say, I know there's a safe hidden somewhere in this room, looks like maybe it's more of a perception thing, but we'll find out when the adventure actually unfolds. So that was
I would like to,
yeah, go ahead.
add something to that, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is a situation where if you know something is in a room and it's hidden, there's another skill that might pop up also, and it's called architecture. That if you understand like the building of a room, you can locate hidden doors and stuff like that within it. So that might be a possibility. But the way that this game was originally written, to find something within a room is a perception roll, and that's a stat. We're not using any house rules, so I'm not changing that when it pops up in the game. If it asks for a perception roll, that's what we're going to be doing.
All right.
But you have a lot of options for searching for things in GURPS when it comes to skills, like Shane was saying. So,
well, and I did find, now I'm not going to go back and change anything at this point, but I looked at the smuggling skill, and it said this is the ability to conceal items and baggage in vehicles. Why that wouldn't be in a room, I don't know, but you can also use it to hide an object in a room or a building. Then it says roll against skill to hide an item from casual inspection. In an active search, the searchers must win a quick contest of search versus your smuggling skill to find the item.
Mm-hmm.
So that indicates that you can use search to search a room. But I don't want to overcomplicate things. That was just an interesting discussion we had.
Right.
I'm totally fine with using perception to search a room. But just wanted to point out, if you're coming from another gaming system, don't assume that one skill is a 1-to-1 ratio. Like search is not the same in GURPS as it might be in D&D or another game. It's searching a person, right? So just wanted to make that point. Okay, so we've spent our 125 points, Tony. We've got our skills. We have our attributes. We have our appearance stuff. We have our advantages, disadvantages, perks, quirks, languages, and skills. I didn't take any techniques. Again, for the purposes of this video, for a how-to, techniques are things you can buy, and they give you a bonus into a pool of related skills. I didn't take any, but that's there. Now, what is left? Is that equipment?
So on the very bottom of this character sheet, you'll get there's a summation of what you spent your points on.
Right.
Basic attributes, secondary characteristics, advantages, disadvantages, perks, quirks, languages, skills, techniques. So all of the math is done, and you spent 125 points. This character is complete, technically. However, you still have $2,000.
What would be the equivalent of
Pounds,
dollars
whatever.
in
Yeah,
this
right.
game setting, right? But GURPS uses dollars generically too, but I mean, it may be pounds, it may be rubles, it may be credits or whatever. But I have the equivalent of $2,000 to buy equipment with.
So let's go to the equipment section in this book.
Okay.
It is on page 264. And it will tell you a few things that we don't really need to worry about. Let's go one step at a time here.
Okay.
I'm assuming your character is going to want to buy a weapon.
He's probably at the
Right.
very least going to buy a short sword and a knife and a garrote. He
Okay.
can get a garrote.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'm going to charge anything for the garrote. In fact, I don't even think it's $2.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah.
I mean,
like
basically,
nothing.
for the
that would be like
purpose-
for a professional one.
Yeah, for the purposes of this adventure, I basically need armor, clothing, whatever armor can be justified in this tech level and setting, a knife and a short sword. That's probably, for the purposes of this adventure, that's probably what I need.
Okay, so why don't we do the short sword? Well, no, let's do the knife first because it's actually going to come up first in this. It's going to be on page 272.
Okay, there's a knife. Okay. You know what I'll probably do if I have $2,000 because I'm a status 0.
Average wealth.
I'm probably going to take a short sword and a knife, maybe 2 knives, if that wouldn't be out of character.
Okay.
I see large knives.
So on the large knife, you'll see ST at the end of the listing. It says 6.
Yeah.
What that means is it takes a minimum strength of 6 to use the weapon properly. If you don't have that strength, you're going to get negatives to your attack roll.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't mean anything to you because your strength is 11. See, I've got it actually written here. Okay. So this will not come into play.
I'm fine.
It's only for very weak people. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Quality, we may worry about that. It depends on whether you want to spend extra money to make this a very good blade or a fine blade or a very fine blade. The default cost on a large knife is 40. Okay.
Okay.
If you spend more money, you can make the blade better and it can do more damage and stuff. But for now, let's skip quality. We'll go back to that. Let's worry about what your skill level is and stuff here first.
Okay.
On your character, you have knife written as Dex easy, and your skill level is 13. You spent 2 points in it. So I'm going to write your skill level is 13 on here.
Okay.
So if the quality of the weapon actually gave you a bonus to damage, like if it was magic or it was fine or whatever, it might bump your skill level up.
Okay.
But your total effective skill with this is 13. Your parry with it is, well, for this weapon, it's actually 8. So it gives you a calculated number that's generic on all of them. Should have actually had a place for you to put the -1 down, but with the knife is so small, you get a -1. And you
I
always
see
round
that.
down
Yeah.
this number.
So on page 272 under large knife, there's a parry of -1. So the parry is actually going to be an 8 because you round down, right?
Yep. In fact, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to fix that right now on all of these because it's pretty quick to be able to do that. Just give me 1 second.
All right. There. So, and that's just a rule of GURPS at the beginning. When it's going over the rules, it's very specifically in these situations you round up, in these situations you round down, and by the rules you round this down. So.
Yep, this was just an oversight. It should have had round down in there in the column. So your parry is 8 for this weapon, meaning you're going to be able to parry an attack with it. What is that, like 30-something% chance, something like that? It's because it's small, but your skill is pretty good. Okay, so 13 is like 80-something.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
I'll tell you exactly what that means when you get into a fight in a little bit. But let's
as a reminder, we're doing this because we're also going to record an adventure that shows all this stuff in action. So, or at least a lot of it in action. We don't know exactly. 8 is a 25.9% chance, and and then 13 is an 83.8% chance.
So the knife has 2 methods of being able to injure somebody, right? You can either swing, which causes cutting damage, or you can thrust with it, causing impaling damage.
I thought that meant thrown. Okay, so it's thrust. So you can either cut or impale. Man, this is pretty detailed because most other games is like you have a sword that does this much damage, but this is actually saying. This is how you this is your chance to parry. You can swing and cut, or you can thrust. That's pretty interesting.
And here it says swing -2 cut. So I just put the bonus in here. I just wrote it in. So your total damage with this thing when you're using it when you're swinging with it is equal to 1 dice. They're always 6-sided.
Right.
Okay. So 1 6-sided dice minus 1. Okay.
Well, I do now. Where is that? That's one thing I don't see on the equipment table is how much damage it does.
It's right here, on the very top left-hand corner. Those are statistics dictated directly from your strength stat.
Oh, okay.
They're static and they don't change until your strength stat goes up or down, if they ever do in your character's lifetime. So they'll always stay the same. The only thing that's different is when you pick up a different weapon and it has a different bonus. Like for the swing on the large knife, it's always a -2.
So the damage of the knife isn't just based on the weapon itself. It's based on your strength and then
your muscles. Yeah.
Okay. Because they'll again using D&D, they'll say a short sword does 1d6 damage, and so that's not this. In this case, they're saying it's the foundational damage stat is based on your strength, and then the weapon might modify it. Okay.
So, and what this also means is, so we know how to determine the damage, right? Your damage with a swing cutting is 1d minus 1 because the bonus on that knife under damage is swing -2 cut, right? When you swing, you cut with it and you do -2 damage on the swing. Your swing is dictated for you by your strength stat. Little difficult to understand at first, but it becomes easier later on. The thrust has no bonus, so it's 0. So whatever your thrust is, 1d minus 1. So both of these attacks actually do the same base damage, 1d minus 1. Both of them.
Okay, so
for your character.
Okay, so you got the -2 because in the book on page 272 under knife it says damage is swing -2 and it does cutting damage. So that's where you're getting that -2 on the bonus.
Correct.
Okay.
And to find out where you got this damage stat from is written on page 16.
Okay. So I guess the one thing I don't get, if swinging I do 1d plus 1, and for the knife, the bonus is -2. Why is the total not -1 instead of -2?
It is -1. I just don't have. Okay, so I don't have a way to make the spreadsheet calculate the
1d1
field.
plus. Okay.
Yes, right. So you have to do this manually.
Okay.
Okay, short sword, right?
Yes,
Let's do
sir.
short sword.
Yeah.
Okay, the minimum strength on the short sword is 8.
Which I've got because I'm at
So
11, so I'm good there.
you don't need to worry about that. So what this would actually do in game terms is for every point that the minimum strength was above your strength, you get a negative to skill. So if the minimum strength was 14, you would have a -3 to your skill all the time with that weapon.
So it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it would start burning up your fatigue points
Okay.
because it's harder to use. So your short sword skill is 12.
Okay. All right. And so then I'm looking at I'm looking in the book, and it says short sword is just swing cut and thrust impel. So there's no negatives on the swing cut. Like the large knife was a -2 on the swing.
Correct.
So it's just straight.
That's it. That stat right there that you're saying.
Straight up. Okay.
1d +1 and 1d -1 for the damage.
Okay.
So statistically, like when you're fighting, this actually makes a difference because the base damage is what you're going to want to chop through somebody's armor. Right. If they have armor.
Right. Okay.
But you'll see. So this is. Ooh, I made a mistake here. That's just close. These are both range 1. That means you can attack. This means you can attack a person 1 hex away from you. Reach.
Okay. Now, what does the C mean? Yeah, go ahead.
C means they have to actually physically be in your hex. So when you're thrusting, you're in close combat. You guys are occupying the same hex. And you'll see that when we start putting pieces on the board.
Okay.
A hex is 1 yard across at any point.
Right.
Okay. So picture a hexagon a yard across with its bisected.
So GURPS uses hexes, not squares.
Hexes exclusively, yes.
Okay.
And this is 2 pounds and costs significantly more.
$400. All right.
Yep. Do you want 2 knives?
Yeah, because if it's cool game wise to have 2, because he might use them as missile. Yeah, he might use them as missile weapons. So.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. And I see there's actually a separate table for the thrown weapon, and it lists a knife. So I see that they actually have it listed separately as a thrown weapon, and that is thrust or thrown impaling damage.
Yeah. Thrown weapon, you have a 13 in that also. Well, look, we're kind of getting ahead. Let's do the Garrett first.
Okay.
That won't take very long.
Yeah, so the Garrett says it has special damage. So.
Right. It's because you choke them, and there are special rules in here for choking somebody. I don't think this has a strength. No. None.
It says damage is special, reach is C, and there's no parrying. Yeah, sure. No parrying, and the weight is negligible.
Yeah. So I'm just going to leave this like this.
Yeah, Garrett is page 405.
Doesn't have any weight.
Oh, no, this is weird.
What's up?
Oh, I was looking at the Garrett. It said see footnote 8, and it said a piece of rope used to strangle. See Garrett's page 405, and I don't have a page 405, so I'm thinking maybe it's in the.
That's in the campaigns book.
Yeah, that's what I was assuming. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
All right. So.
Okay, so let's do thrown weapon knife. Thrown weapon knife is equal to, well, that's 0 accuracy. That means
I'm such an idiot. I was assuming that was acceleration because it was thrown. Because there was, anyway. All right.
So many missile weapons have an accuracy number. If you aim with it, you'll get that number as an addition to your skill.
Okay. Ah, I see. Okay. So there is some stuff that will do that.
Right.
I don't know if you heard that
the
or
large
not.
Large knife does not have any bonuses to damage on a thrust impale. So when you throw it, that's how much damage it does.
All
1d
right.
-1. Rate of fire is 1 shots. Well, you got 2, so there is no recoil on a knife. We won't add any pounds or cost because we already added that on the top.
Right.
We'd just be multiplying it, so it doesn't really make any difference. Half damage. So let's do this, right? Half damage and max. What does that mean? So this is literally how far you can throw it before you only take half damage.
Ah, oh, so, okay. And this is...
range.
Yeah, I'm looking at the knife. Well, I see this. Go ahead.
It's going to be that number times 0.8 is literally talking about your strength stat times 0.8.
Okay.
That's how many yards. That's how many yards you can throw it before it decelerates so much that you only take half damage.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's 0.8, and then there's 0.15.
1.5
or 1.5.
Yeah.
So.
8.8 yards. We would just round that up to 9.
And then the max I can go. The max I can go is 1.5. So that means no matter what, the furthest I can throw it is 16 yards basically, but after 9 yards, it only does half damage. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right.
Just to solidify this, ranged weapons only have a range stat. If a weapon has only one range number, this is the maximum range in yards at which it can attack a target. If 2 numbers appear separated by a slash, the first is half damage range and the second is max. Damaging attacks on targets at or beyond half damage inflict half damage, and those that require a health roll to resist are resisted at +3. Muscle-powered weapons usually list half damage and max as multiples of the wielder's strength, not as a fixed range. For example, times 10 means half damage is 10 times strength, and max is 15 times strength. So for you, it would be 0.8 times 11, which is 8.8, and 1.5 times 11, which is 16.5. So I would round them both up just because
9 and 17.
You can round.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Okay, so that covers the weapons.
Bulk doesn't matter. Bulk only happens when you're like running and gunning. There's no running and gunning in this game.
Right. Yeah. All right. In this setting, anyway. So, I guess just to get things wrapped up, I guess do we just need to look at armor here, or is there any other equipment that we should be looking at?
Well, you're going to want some kind of armor.
Yeah.
So There's a lot of stuff on here because this was built for the game that I run, and I
Right.
use more optional rules. You're only going to use like maybe a few of these things, so don't worry about all of these
Okay.
statistics.
Well, I'm
But
okay. Go ahead.
page 283 is where all the body armor is in the characters book,
I,
basic set
I
characters.
I'm assuming for the setting that we're in that we're looking at like leather.
Listed here.
So to keep it somewhat within that we're saying it's sort of a 1600s England. Um,
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of people walking around with chainmail armor on, breaking into.
No. No.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the body armor. The DR I assume is damage reduction.
Yeah, correct. Damage resistance.
Now, what is
Mm-hmm.
LC? What does that stand for?
Legality class. So
Okay.
for many pieces of equipment, there is a legality class on them. You're really not going to need to worry about that.
Okay.
It will pop up like in my Cyberpunk game. It's pretty enforced. Like there's there's stuff in there that has legality classes such that they're completely prohibited by many different types of people. So
All right. So just for simplicity's sake, because you can buy armor for multiple parts of your body, and
mm-hmm,
in fact, there's a chart.
mm-hmm,
I'm gonna kind of show this real quick. There's a chart in the game that shows all the different places you can be hit or target to hit people. In fact,
yeah,
you told me before that in GURPS, when you're in combat, you say I want to hit his arm or I want to hit his head, and if you don't
yes,
declare, then it's assumed to be center mass, like you're going for their chest or whatever. So
right,
just to make things, because we've already been going close to 4 hours now.
mm-hmm,
It says the buff coat, the leather buff coat
mm-hmm,
protects the body and the limbs. So
right.
would that be torso, arms, and legs? Would that?
That's what I would assume. I think that's what they were wearing as armor, like the Continental soldiers and stuff like that. Colonial soldiers would have been wearing a buff coat. I think that's what
Okay.
that is. It's a big, heavy leather coat. It weighs 16 pounds.
Yeah. Well, it's. I'm looking at leather. By the time I do a bunch of different pieces of leather, it's going to add up about the same anyway. Now it's tech level 4, which we're at tech level 4, but I don't want to go for that if you don't feel it fits the setting. I'm just trying to go for
Well, I mean,
simplicity.
it does, but I think there may be leather armor here that makes more sense for the character
Okay, well that's fine.
concept rather than. So, I mean, you can actually buy leather armor piece by piece with two. It'll give you 2 damage resistance all over if that's what you want. I mean, it's
Yeah.
in here.
Well, I just don't know. Like, what are
Um,
the negatives for other than the weight? Are there any negatives?
the weight actually is where you get the negatives.
Okay. Well, how
So,
far
so
away am
what
I? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
once you hit over um, your encumbrance limit,
Yeah.
which is
What?
dictated by your strength.
Right. I'm looking at that right now. So,
Right.
how much am I carrying right now? How much do I have left
Okay.
before I get
Not
encumbered?
not very much. You only are carrying 4 pounds worth of gear.
Yeah, I've got 4 pounds of gear. So, in order to before I become encumbered, I can wear up to 24 pounds. So I've still got about 20 pounds worth of weight that I can have
Right.
before I'm considered encumbered. So
That's right.
um, let's see here. Leather jacket. Okay, so if I get a leather jacket and that
Mm-hmm.
covers my arms and torso,
Right.
and then I get leather pants that'll cover my legs and my groin. So that would
Mm-hmm.
cover
Most of your body,
Most of my
everything
body.
but your
Yeah, that would cover most of my body.
feet, hands, and head.
Yeah. So let's do that. Let's get the leather jacket and the leather pants, and that's on page 283 for anybody watching this. Um, leather jacket is $50, and the leather pants are $40. So I'm still well within my $2,000.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want gloves or not. I'm trying to think role playing
Well,
wise. Like, would he want to wear leather
so
gloves that would
screw up his hands.
Yeah.
If we were playing with more advanced rules, it would come into play, but we're not. So
Okay. Well, then he's.
it's not going to come into play.
Well, then I'll just do. Um, let's see.
Four, three.
What the heck is a solarette? I'm looking at footwear.
They're metal boots.
Okay, he's definitely not going to wear that.
Yeah, they're plated boots. Plate boots.
Yeah, he'll probably do boots and leather gloves, and then I'm looking a face mask. What the heck? They've
You
got
can get a
Hmm?
leather helmet or a leather cap, one of the two.
Yeah, that protects the skull and the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably do that if it doesn't have any disadvantages other than weight. I'll probably do the leather helm, the leather gloves, and the boots.
So the leather helm wouldn't mess with your vision or anything like that because it's going to be like open
Right.
faced. I mean, it's not like it's going to be a bucket helm or anything like that. It's just
Well,
leather, but it might screw up your hearing though because it's going to be wrapping around the guy's ears. But honestly, the rules for what I'm going to be playing for you are not going to be that
okay.
dramatically brought out. I mean, I would be adding that if we were playing a campaign because I add more sophisticated rules from other books, but it's not going to be in this.
Okay. Well, in that
So I wouldn't
case,
worry about it.
if that's the case, I'll do a leather helm and leather gloves and boots. So, and that's all well within my financial resources. So,
Yep, should be.
and that should, unless we need to, unless he needs like rope and climbing gear and all that. I don't know how detailed you want to be there. We should be done on his equipment. I don't even
Yeah.
see. I'm looking. Do they even have miscellaneous equipment like that here in the book?
Yeah. If you look on page 280, 288, 288 and 289. While I write the rest
Okay.
of
It's
this
not in a
down.
table. It's just list. Okay. I see. I need some lock picks.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
Let me write this stuff down.
Yep, you're definitely going to want lock picks.
Oh, I definitely need for this tech level. I need a thermal imaging scope. So let me make sure to write that down.
If you want that kind of weight, you want to carry that thing around with you.
Uh,
You
and
don't have
and
a gun to put.
what 1600s thief would be complete without a cigarette lighter, or a heavy flashlight?
Yep. Got to make sure you keep an eye on that tech level.
Yeah.
To,
Oh yeah. What was I thinking? I was about to look for the The cybernetic eye replacement.
Yeah, right. 20 boots.
It says pole 6 foot, and then it says pole 10 foot for things you wouldn't touch with a 6-foot pole.
6-foot pole.
Yeah, for things you wouldn't touch with the 6-foot pole, you need a 10-foot pole. All right, I'm going to pause it while we're finishing up the
most
equipment.
ubiquitous piece of equipment D&D.
Yeah, the 10-foot pole.
Put to anybody.
Yeah. All right,
somebody had to bring it with them.
All right, I'm going to pause it while we're figuring out the equipment, the rest of it.
Okay.
Okay, so again, due to the magic of video pausing, we figured out all the equipment and spared the listeners and/or watchers the agony of all the oh, what page is this on? How much is that weigh? Da, 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 da. One thing that was interesting that came out of the discussion was that I asked you about a bullseye lantern, which would be kind of a thieves lantern, and you did say as GM you would allow just taking a regular lantern and saying that it was rigged to be that way. So appreciate that. So ended up armor-wise, we took jacket, pants, gloves, helmet, which are all leather, and then some boots. And then if you'll scroll down there, Mr. Tony, and we'll see the miscellaneous equipment I took, which is why does that cost way over? Anyway, okay, so I took lock picks, which makes sense as a thief. 10 yards of rope. We had a discussion on whether I needed the rope or not. I went ahead and took it because I could afford it both money-wise and encumbrance-wise. An iron spike, which you can use to like spike a door for other, uses. Thought a thief might want that. I have a lantern that's rigged as a bullseye, and I had a pint of oil for that lantern. So those are the equipment, and then that I have. And then Tony shared with me that the game we'll be playing is that I'll be provided with a sack for my burgled goods. So you see there that my total weight carried is 22 pounds. And I can go up to 24 pounds without being encumbered, and it cost me $800 for all of that. So, I would, if were this going to be an ongoing character, that would still have $1,200 left over. But then you get into cost of living and all this other stuff that comes into the game. So that's it, man. That's Tony the Mook.
Tony the Mook.
Yeah, let's just real quick. Let's scan the character sheet one more time, and then we'll call it a night. So there's the strength, dexterity, IQ, health, hit points, willpower, perception, fatigue points, his speed, his movement, his encumbrance, his appearance, all that. There's my advantages: danger sense, daredevil, hard to subdue, high manual dexterity. His disadvantage: he's curious and he's overconfident. Perks: he has an honest face. Quirks: he likes shiny silverware. He speaks the common language English just fine, like a normal person. There's my skills: acrobatics, climbing, fast talk, garret, jumping, knife, lockpicking, pickpocket, scrounging, short sword, sleight of hand, stealth, and thrown weapon knife. And then, of course, I pumped up stealth quite a bit, given what I'm going to be doing. And then we had the equipment we just talked about. So that's a 125-point character in GURPS. Geared towards being a thief who's going to break into somebody's house in what would roughly be the 1600s in a European country like England. So, anything you want to add to that, Mr. Incredibly Patient and Helpful Tony?
No, I think we pretty much exhaustively went through everything here. Real quick, these stats are actually the damage resistance in the book.
Okay.
It's not going to actually be this detailed when we play the game, but each one of these is damage resistance for a specific type of attack.
I see. What impel was that? Crush, cut, Impale. What is PI? What does PI stand for?
Piercing, it would be if somebody shot you.
Okay. And
So
then go ahead.
this actually is for the more sophisticated rules after the basic set in the other books. These are all damage resistance scores, but in the basic set characters, it's just one damage resistance score that covers them all. So
Okay.
that's basically what I did.
But the main thing to keep it, and there's burning, and then dawn. Is that a rule for how long it takes to put stuff on?
That's
The dawn.
correct.
Okay. And then what is the DX column there? Why is that showing a dexterity column?
This would be if you decided to layer armor, which you can do in this if you wanted to,
But it hurts your
wear.
dexterity.
It will hurt your dexterity.
Okay.
So all of this leather armor that you're wearing, if you wanted to pile a suit of mail over the top of it, it would be legal. You'd get bonus damage resistance over all of these, but your dexterity would suffer.
Okay, that's incredibly helpful to know. So, but the main takeaway I think that people will get from this, if they're coming to GURPS as a new role player, never played anything, or if they're coming from other um, gaming systems like me, uh, armor in GURPS is damage resistance. It doesn't make you harder to hit. The other thing is, in a lot of other games, you just say, hey, I'm wearing leather armor, and then it's a one size fits all numerical statistic. In this, you have to armor different parts of your body. And when you're being attacked, or if you're attacking somebody else, you can say, I'm attacking their face or their head, or I'm attacking their leg or whatever. So that's important. Yeah, Tony's feeling in the areas right now that it covers. So, man, I think we're good. I really appreciate you. I'm
Yeah,
really looking forward
good.
to recording the actual adventure, and that way we'll have the other side of the coin. We've spent this time. We've shown how to make a GURPS character, which is very involved, very cool. I love how all the rules work together, how fine-tuned everything is, and the different ways you can do stuff. And I already see the strength between the tech level and allowing what kinds of advantages and disadvantages. It just really adapts itself well to all the different genres. I see, without having even played it yet, why it works well for multiple genres, and why it can be considered a universal system. So really looking forward to that.